Let me paint a picture for you. It is 6:47 in the morning. Your alarm has just gone off. You are not fully awake yet, but your throat already is. Before you open your eyes, before your feet even touch the floor, your throat is doing that thing it does every single morning. That low, persistent heaviness sitting right at the back. That urge to clear it once, then twice, then again, which accomplishes almost nothing except making the person beside you very aware that you are awake. So you go through your routine. Bathroom, water, maybe a cup of tea. And for about 20 minutes, it feels a little better. Then it comes back, and it stays with you for the rest of the day. Now, if I asked you how long this has been happening, I suspect most of you would have to stop and think, because the honest answer is that you genuinely cannot remember when it started. It crept in gradually. First, it was only mornings. Then it was all day. Then it became so familiar that it stopped feeling like a symptom at all and started feeling like just you. That slow normalization of something your body should not be doing is exactly what I want to talk about today. Because the people who suffer most from this symptom are almost always the ones who have received the least real explanation for it. Today, that changes. My name is Dr. Elias Smith, and I have spent years studying preventive health and senior wellness, reading the research, cutting through the noise, and translating what the science actually says into language that is genuinely useful for people over 55. Persistent throat mucus, that constant sensation of coating, thickness, something always sitting there, is one of the most common complaints I hear. And the response most of the people who reach me have already received can usually be summed up in 4 words. Drink more water, dear. That is not an explanation. That is a dismissal, and you deserve better than that. Today I am going to walk you through 5 specific, research-supported causes of persistent throat mucus in adults over 55. And I am going to do something most videos on this topic skip entirely. I am going to tell you honestly which of these causes tends to disguise itself as the others, so that people end up treating the wrong thing for months and wondering why nothing is working. Because in most cases I see, this is not a single cause problem. It is a layered one. And that layering is exactly why simple fixes keep falling short. Before we get into it, I have a question for you. Has anyone, a doctor, a pharmacist, a specialist, ever sat down with you and actually explained what is happening in your throat and why? Just type yes or no in the comments. I read every single one, and your answer will tell me a great deal about what brought you here today. Let us start with the biology, because without this foundation, none of the 5 causes will fully make sense. Your body produces somewhere between 1 and 2 liters of mucus every single day. You never notice the vast majority of it. You swallow it reflexively dozens of times an hour, without any awareness that it is happening. This is completely normal. Mucus is not the problem. Mucus is a biological feature, not a flaw. It coats and protects the lining of your airway. It traps inhaled particles, dust, bacteria, and fungal spores before they can travel deeper into your lungs. It keeps delicate membranes moist and structurally resilient. Without it, your airways would dry out and crack, leaving you exposed to every airborne pathogen you encounter. Your body produces mucus because it is supposed to. The problem is not production. The problem is clearance. Your airways are lined with microscopic hair-like structures called cilia. These cilia beat rhythmically and constantly, millions of coordinated movements per minute, sweeping mucus upward and outward before it can accumulate. In a younger adult, this system is highly efficient. Mucus is produced and swept clear almost immediately, long before it ever builds to a level you can feel. Here is what changes. Research confirms that as we age, ciliary beat frequency slows measurably. The clearance system becomes less efficient. Mucus that would have been swept away in seconds at 40 can sit, accumulate, and thicken over hours at 65. And this means one critical thing for everything we are about to discuss. Any factor that pushes your body toward excess mucus production will land harder and last longer in you today than it would have 2 decades ago. Your system is less forgiving now, not because you're failing, but because the physiology has shifted. That is your foundation. Before we move on, drop your name and your age in the comments. I would love to know who I am talking to today. Now, here are the 5 causes. The first cause is the one I consider most important to understand, because it is the one most likely to be dismissed, overlooked, or blamed on something else entirely. It is called laryngopharyngeal reflux, or LPR. And before you decide this does not apply to you, because you do not have heartburn, stay with me, because that assumption is precisely the problem. Most people are familiar with classic acid reflux. Burning in the chest after a meal, obvious discomfort, a clear signal from your body that something is wrong. LPR is fundamentally different in one specific and important way. There is no heartburn, no chest burning, no obvious digestive symptom of any kind, which is exactly why it goes unidentified for so long. Here is what is happening mechanically. At the junction between your esophagus and your stomach sits a muscular ring, a valve whose only job is to stay closed after you eat, keeping stomach acid locked away where it belongs. With age, the muscular tone of that valve gradually diminishes. Research on lower esophageal sphincter function in older adults confirms this is a well-documented part of the aging gastrointestinal system. When that valve does not close completely, stomach acid can travel upward, not just into the esophagus, but all the way into the throat and voice box. And it does this silently, in tiny amounts, often while you sleep, because lying flat removes a gravitational barrier that keeps acid down during the day. Now here's the biological detail that makes this so significant and so persistent. The tissues of your throat are not built to tolerate acid the way your esophagus is. Even a microscopic trace of acid making contact with your throat lining triggers an immediate protective response. Your body rushes to coat and buffer that irritated tissue with thick mucus. This is completely logical biology. Your body is trying to protect you, but when it is happening repeatedly and silently through the night, you wake every morning to that familiar heaviness with no idea why, because there was no heartburn to warn you. Clinical research in the ear, nose, and throat literature consistently shows that a substantial proportion of LPR patients, figures approaching half in several studies, report no heartburn at all, just throat symptoms, persistent clearing, morning roughness, the sensation that something is always sitting there. Here is a picture that will make this concrete. A retired teacher I worked with, 71 years old, had been dealing with morning throat mucus for over 2 years. She had tried allergy medication, air filters, changing her pillow. Nothing moved the needle. When I reviewed her daily routine, she mentioned that her habit was to eat a light dinner around 8:30 in the evening, watch television, and be asleep by 9:30. That 60-minute window, horizontal with the stomach still processing a meal, was where the problem lived. When she shifted dinner to before 7 and made one postural change I will describe in the action plan, her morning symptoms were significantly better within 10 days. We did not treat her throat. We addressed what was happening while she slept. Ask yourself honestly, is your throat noticeably worse in the morning than in the afternoon? Does it worsen when you bend forward or recline? Those patterns are signatures of what is happening during sleep. If the first cause surprised you, the second one may frustrate you, because it is something you are exposed to for hours every day without knowing it. When most people think about environmental triggers for throat and sinus problems, they think outdoors. Pollen counts, seasonal changes, traffic pollution. What almost nobody considers is the air inside their own home. And the research here is startling. The United States Environmental Protection Agency has documented that indoor air is routinely 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, and in some conditions considerably more. Your home is not a clean room. It is a closed or semi-closed environment that concentrates whatever is circulating inside it. And in older homes especially, that can include a considerable amount of material your airway does not appreciate. Dust mites concentrate in carpets, mattresses, and upholstered furniture. Heating and air conditioning systems that are not regularly maintained circulate fungal spores, fine particulate matter and allergens throughout your living space for hours every day. During winter, when heating runs continuously, indoor humidity drops sharply, and dry air is directly irritating to nasal and throat tissue. Your body responds to that dryness by ramping up protective mucus production. You are not sick. Your airway is simply trying to stay moist in an environment that is working against it. And then there are the products most people never associate with respiratory symptoms. Scented candles, air fresheners, fabric softeners, chemical cleaning sprays. These release volatile organic compounds and fine particulates that, with regular repeated exposure, create low-grade chronic airway irritation, not the dramatic irritation of a chemical accident, just a quiet, sustained kind that keeps mucus production elevated day after day without ever announcing itself as a cause. Here is what makes this especially relevant to this age group. Retirement means more hours spent at home. More hours at home means more hours of sustained exposure to whatever is in that indoor air. A symptom that has been gradually worsening over the past few years may be tracking almost exactly with increasing time spent indoors. It is not aging that is driving it. It is exposure duration. The practical responses here are specific and affordable, and I will walk through them in the action plan. If you are still watching and this is helping you, type the number 2 in the comments. So, I know you are here with me. The third cause generates the most visible reaction in my consultations, because a connection, once explained, is obvious, and yet almost no one makes it. We do not tend to question medications we have been taking faithfully for months or years. The main class I want to address is ACE inhibitors, angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors. These are among the most widely prescribed blood pressure medications in the world. You may know them by names like lisinopril, enalapril, or ramipril. They are effective. They serve a genuinely important cardiovascular purpose, but they carry a recognized class-wide side effect that is directly relevant to what we are discussing today. ACE inhibitors block the enzyme responsible for converting angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. As part of that mechanism, they allow a chemical called bradykinin to accumulate in the body. In somewhere between 5 and 20% of people who take them, a range documented clearly in the peer-reviewed literature that bradykinin accumulation causes persistent irritation in the throat and airways. The result is an ongoing urge to clear the throat, a sensation of mucus that will not resolve, and sometimes a dry, non-productive cough. This is not an allergy. It is not your body reacting badly. It is a pharmacological consequence of how the drug works, and your airways happen to be sensitive to it. Here is a specific detail that causes this connection to be missed almost every single time. The side effect typically does not appear immediately after starting the medication. It can take weeks or even months to emerge. So the person who started lisinopril 10 months ago and noticed their throat changing 7 months ago never connects those two events. The gap seems too large. But that delayed onset is precisely what the medical literature describes. And large-scale research has found that older adults have meaningfully higher odds of experiencing this effect compared with younger users of the same medication. I also want to mention a second category that rarely gets discussed in this context: long-term antihistamine use. Many people take over-the-counter antihistamines regularly, assuming that if seasonal allergies are part of the problem, the antihistamine must be helping. In the short term, antihistamines do dry secretions, but with prolonged regular use, the nasal lining can develop a rebound effect, overproducing mucus to compensate for the suppression. The result is mucus that is thicker, stickier, and harder to clear than what you started with. If you take a blood pressure medication and do not know whether it belongs to the ACE inhibitor class, your pharmacist can tell you in under 60 seconds. If it does, it is worth having a specific conversation with your prescribing physician about whether an ARB, an angiotensin receptor blocker, might achieve the same cardiovascular goal without this particular mechanism and its consequences for your throat. Please do not stop or change prescription on your own. If you're still watching and finding this useful, type the word clarity in the comments, because that is exactly what I want this conversation to give you. The fourth cause is one that virtually every older adult has heard some version of. Stay hydrated. Drink more water. But almost no one has had it explained in a way that makes the connection to throat mucus genuinely clear. So, let me give you the physiology. Your mucus is approximately 95% water. That is not a figure I use loosely. It is the composition of airway mucus in a well-hydrated person. And the viscosity of that mucus, how thin and fluid versus thick and sticky it is directly, dramatically, and almost immediately affected by the hydration state of surrounding tissue. When you are well hydrated, mucus stays thin and mobile. It moves freely. It is swept along by the ciliary system we discussed earlier, clear before it accumulates and processed without you ever noticing. When you are mildly dehydrated, not severely dehydrated, not clinically ill, just slightly below optimal, that same mucus thickens. It becomes sticky. It resists a ciliary clearance system that is already working less efficiently with age, and it clings to the back of the throat in exactly the way you are experiencing. Now, here is the age-specific piece of physiology that turns this from a simple reminder into something genuinely important. Research in peer-reviewed sports and exercise medicine literature has confirmed that the thirst mechanism becomes significantly and measurably less reliable with age. A younger adult begins to feel thirst at relatively mild levels of dehydration. The body sends an early warning signal, well, before meaningful dehydration sets in. In adults over 60, that early warning system is substantially blunted. You can be dehydrated enough to noticeably affect your mucus consistency and your morning throat experience without feeling particularly thirsty at all. What this means in practice is that waiting for thirst to prompt you to drink puts you behind the curve by definition. You are already in a state that is thickening your mucus before your body tells you to do anything about it. Deliberate, scheduled hydration across the day, rather than reactive hydration triggered by thirst, is what your physiology actually calls for. A practical reference point widely cited in clinical geriatric nutrition is roughly 30 milliliters of fluid per kilogram of body weight per day from all sources. That includes water, herbal teas, soups, and water-rich foods. If you have heart or kidney disease, or you've been told to limit fluids, that figure does not apply to you, and your own doctor's guidance takes precedence. The behavioral key for everyone else is consistency. Steady intake distributed across the day, not a large quantity in the evening, trying to make up for a dry morning. If you are still with me, type the number 4 in the comments. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do. Your support is genuinely what keeps this content going. The fifth cause is the one I want to approach most carefully, because I know how it might initially sound, and I want to be precise about what I am and am not saying. I am not saying your symptoms are psychological. I am saying your nervous system is a biological system with direct, measurable, documented connections to your airway physiology, and those connections are active in ways very few people in this age group have had explained to them. Here is the mechanism. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, runs from your brainstem through your chest and into your abdomen. It directly supplies your airways, your heart, and your digestive system. It is the primary pathway of your parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for rest, regulation, and recovery. When you are under sustained chronic stress, not necessarily dramatic obvious stress, but the low-grade ongoing kind that many older adults carry quietly, the balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems shifts. And when that balance shifts, vagal signaling to your airways changes in ways that directly influence mucus production. Research in respiratory physiology, including work published in journals covering pulmonary and allergic medicine, describes a process called neurogenic airway inflammation. Nerves release chemical mediators in response to sustained autonomic dysregulation, and those mediators trigger inflammatory responses in airway tissue that include increased secretion from mucus glands. In addition, chronically elevated cortisol, a reliable consequence of prolonged stress, disrupts mast cells in the airway lining. Disrupted mast cells release histamine and pro-inflammatory signaling molecules that tell mucus glands to increase output. This is not fringe science. It is established airway physiology, and it matters specifically for adults in this age group, because chronic stress in older adults often looks very different from what younger people associate with the word stress. It is not necessarily the acute, obvious stress of crisis. It is the quieter, sustained kind: health concerns, disturbed sleep, social loss, financial uncertainty, the ongoing weight of responsibility for others. From your nervous system's perspective, that sustained low-grade activation is still stress, and your airways are responding to it biochemically whether or not you feel stress in conventional sense. The practical implication is this: addressing throat mucus through behavioral and environmental steps alone, with no attention to nervous system regulation, will produce incomplete results for a meaningful number of people. This is not a minor footnote. For some of you, it may be the most important piece of the entire conversation. The action plan addresses it directly. Before the action plan, I need to take a moment that is genuinely important, and I do not want to rush past it. The vast majority of persistent throat mucus in older adults is benign. It is exactly what we have been discussing. Specific, identifiable, addressable physiology. But some throat symptoms in this age group can be signals of something that requires prompt professional evaluation rather than self-management. Please make an appointment with your doctor without delay if you notice any of the following: mucus that is persistently tinged with blood, even in small amounts; difficulty swallowing that is gradually worsening over weeks; unexplained weight loss alongside your throat symptoms; a visible or palpable swelling in your neck that has appeared recently; a significant change in your voice that is not improving over time. None of these is a reason to panic. All of them are reasons to be evaluated promptly. Please do not work around them. Now, everything we have covered translates into something you can actually begin tonight. First, stop eating at least 3 hours before you lie down. This single behavioral change reduces the opportunity for acid to reach your throat more than almost any other step. 3 hours of upright time after your last meal is the starting point for addressing nighttime silent reflux. Second, raise the head into your bed. Use a firm wedge placed under the mattress, or risers under the legs at the head of the bed, not extra pillows under your head, which bend your neck and can compress your abdomen. A gentle, consistent incline of even a few centimeters puts gravity to work across the full 8 hours you are horizontal. It is one of the best supported positional changes for reducing acid migration at night. Third, audit your indoor air. Change your heating and cooling filter this week if it has not been changed recently. Consider a quality HEPA air purifier for your bedroom, where you spend 8 continuous hours breathing whatever's in that air. Try a 2-week elimination of scented candles, air fresheners, and chemical spray products. Add a humidifier to your bedroom during heating season, targeting indoor humidity between 40 and 60%. That range supports moist airway tissue without encouraging the mold growth that would create a different problem. Fourth, review your medication list with your prescribing physician. If you take a blood pressure medication, ask your pharmacist or doctor specifically whether it is an ACE inhibitor. Write down the timeline, when your throat symptoms began, and when any medication was started or adjusted. Bring that written chronology to the appointment. If your medication belongs to that class, ask whether an ARB might achieve the same cardiovascular goal without the bradykinin-related mechanism. Fifth, rehydrate deliberately rather than reactively. Start every morning with 1 or 2 glasses of warm water before coffee and before food. That immediately addresses overnight dehydration, when your mucus is at its thickest. Set reminders through the day, not because you will feel thirsty, but because the physiology makes clear that thirst in this age group is a lagging indicator. Increase water-rich foods consistently. Soups, cucumber, herbal teas, watermelon. 6. Begin a daily slow breathing practice. Research on slow diaphragmatic breathing confirms that it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reduces circulating cortisol, and downregulates the autonomic signals that contribute to airway inflammation. You do not need a studio or a course. You need 5 to 10 minutes each morning. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 counts. Brief hold. Exhale slowly through your mouth for 6 to 8 counts. Repeat. That extended exhale is what specifically activates the parasympathetic pathway. 5 minutes each morning before your day begins is a genuine physiological intervention. It costs nothing, and it compounds over time. Here is what I want you to carry out of this conversation. The mucus coating the back of your throat has a reason. In fact, it almost certainly has more than one, working together in a way that makes each individual cause harder to resolve on its own. Silent acid creeping up while you sleep, with no heartburn to warn you. The air inside your own home creating sustained low-grade irritation hour after hour. A medication you have taken faithfully for months that no one ever thought to connect to your throat. Mild chronic dehydration running just below the threshold that triggers obvious thirst. And your nervous system carrying the weight of sustained stress, sending biochemical signals directly to your airways. None of these require you to simply accept a life of constant throat clearing. Each has a specific, practical, evidence-grounded response. And not a single first step I describe requires a specialist or prescription. They require knowledge, consistency, and a decision to treat your symptoms as a signal worth responding to rather than a nuisance to manage around. If someone has ever told you that this is simply part of getting older, I hope today gave you a fundamentally different picture. You are not just aging. You are dealing with specific, layered, identifiable physiology, and you deserve to understand it. I have an upcoming video focused on nighttime physiology, on what your body does in the hours between sleep and waking, and how that drives some of the most persistent and misunderstood health complaints I hear from adults in this age group. If your mornings have been defined by this symptom, that video will be directly relevant to you. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you see it when it comes out. If this gave you something genuinely useful today, I would ask one thing. Share it with one person in your life who has been quietly dealing with the same thing. One share from you could be the first real explanation that person has ever received about their own body. And before you go, tell me in the comments which of these 5 causes had never been explained to you before and how long you have been managing this. I read every single comment.